Chapter 1276, Wandering Magician. Upon seeing this scene, Katerina's body took a step back uncontrollably as her mind fell silent. 2 seconds later, she opened her mouth and let out a male voice.
"Hey, little raven."
Without waiting for the young man to respond, Katerina smiled and said,
"Aren't you looking down on me by bringing just a few avatars? Could it be that you're a mailman, specifically here to deliver me Beyonder ingredients? Tell me, what kind of cooperation do you want? I don't hate you too much. After all, what happened back then was planned by that zealot. The mastermind was a Lista tutor, and you can only be considered an accomplice."
The man opposite him caught the crown that was covered in rust and blood. He straightened up and shook his head with a smile.
"I have my reservations in cooperating with you after hearing your voice. Why don't you get Sauron and Einhorn to talk to me?"
Tusk, Tusk, it's been so many years, yet you're still as willful as a child. Do you still remember who was responsible for carrying you when you were still a baby? Who was the one who burned away your hair?
The Red Angel evil spirit mocked without any compromises. The young man opposite him used his empty hand to straighten his monocle and calmly turned around before walking out the door without any hesitation. During this process, he sighed softly.
"Childish."
Seeing that Eamon had no intention of stopping, the Red Angel fell silent for a few seconds. Before the other party walked out of the room, it controlled Katerina's body and chuckled.
Don't think that I don't know what you want to do, but it doesn't matter. Since you don't have the same thoughts as that zealot, then there's room for cooperation.
Eamon stopped and turned halfway to look at Demoness of White Katerina, who was possessed by the Red Angel evil spirit. The monocle on his right eye seemed to glimmer slightly. Awa County, in a city that was being rebuilt after war, inside a bar which had burn marks. A man wearing an old cap took the cup and took a sip. He couldn't help but complain. "Toby, did you add too much damned water to your beer?" The boss, who doubled up as bartender, wiped his cup and snorted. "Do you still remember the alcohol ban from before? Oleg, you should be thankful that you even have alcohol to drink." The burly man, who was named Oleg, murmured a few words before he focused on drinking his beer. Beside him was a bronze-skinned man with rolled-up sleeves. He looked up and surveyed the area. "I heard that the alcohol ban will soon be lifted because Faina Potter's food will soon be sent over. Also, Fasak and Intis will pay reparations with plenty of food." The bar owner, Toby, had just responded when he heard the door open. He looked up and saw a young man who seemed to be a wandering magician walk in. "I can only say that I hope so. May the Lord watch over us." This man was wearing a long black robe and a classic top hat. He walked to the bar counter and sat on a high stool. "A cup of Southville beer." The man placed several copper pence on the counter. The burly man named Oleg turned his head to look at the stranger and asked curiously, "Not from around here? A magician?" The young man, who didn't have any outstanding features, laughed and said, "Yes, the magic that I'm best at is to satisfy the wishes of people." Oleg immediately whistled. "What did I hear? To satisfy the wishes of people? Lord, there's a fellow pretending to be a deity here." This teasing caused everyone to burst into laughter. The young man who claimed to be a magician wasn't angry. He smiled and said, "That's just a special magic trick." Oleg gulped down a mouthful of bland beer and laughed. "Then fulfill my wish and let this stingy boss treat me to a glass of beer." "All right." The young man in a black robe raised his right hand and tapped lightly on the table, with the glass slamming onto the counter loudly. The bar owner poured a glass of beer and pushed it in front of Oleg. Then he retracted his hand and repeated his glass wiping. This scene that seemed familiar to him stunned Oleg. He shouted blankly, "Toby, you know him?" "No." The boss, Toby, glanced at Oleg like he was a fool. Oleg raised the glass of beer with uncertainty and took a careful sip to see if Toby would make him pay for it. Seeing that the bar owner no longer bothered with him, the burly man turned his head in surprise and looked at the young man in a black robe and a tall hat. "How did you do it?" "I told you that it's a special magic trick." The young man leisurely drank a mouthful of Southville beer. While Aulick remained in shock, the man beside him with rolled-up sleeves sneered. "I dare bet that you and Toby must have colluded beforehand. Your knocking on the table is to say that you'll pay for the beer." "You can make another wish," the wandering magician replied nonchalantly. The man with his sleeves rolled up said smugly, "My brother and I have a house that collapsed during one of the bombings and is being rebuilt. My wish is that it will return to its original state before I return." This wasn't an easy task. The wandering magician raised his right hand and snapped his fingers before smiling. "All right, your wish has been granted." The people who were paying attention to this broke out into laughter. They no longer paid attention to the foreigner and his clumsy magic show. After drinking, the man with his sleeves rolled up left the bar in a drunken stupor with Aulick and staggered down the street towards the suburbs. 15 minutes later, they returned to the area where they were rebuilding their home. They were about to enter the tent that was issued by the government. At this moment, a gust of cold wind blew and made them shudder at the same time. Soon after, a 2-story building appeared before their eyes. It was a house that they were very familiar with and had spent years building. Aulick and his brother subconsciously turned their heads and saw the same confusion in each other's eyes. "I didn't drink that much. That damn Toby mixed so much water into the beer," Aulick murmured, as if he was seeing things thanks to his intoxication. His brother didn't respond. After being stunned for a few seconds, he suddenly widened his stride and rushed to the house, touching the wall and the door. "It's real, it's real," he kept muttering to himself as if he had gone crazy. Aulick did the same thing. Finally, he confirmed that their house had been restored to its original state. This made him both surprised and scared. At this moment, his brother suddenly said, "My wish was granted. That magician. Before he finished his sentence, he turned around and ran towards the bar. Aulick came to his senses and followed closely behind. Bang! They pushed open the bar's door and rushed in, casting their gaze at the bar counter. However, the black-robed and tall hat-wearing wandering magician had already left. Aulick and his brother looked around. They appeared relieved, but they also felt like they had lost something. In the square of the city, the young wandering magician was squatting in front of a 10-year-old girl. "My magic is to fulfill your wish." He turned his head and glanced at the nearby Evernight Cathedral. The little girl had run out from the Evernight Mass, seemingly preferring the empty square. After some thought, she looked at the gentle Mr. Magician and said,
My wish is for my father, uncle, and brother to come back to life. I don't want their bereavement money.
The wandering magician didn't respond as he gazed deeply at the little girl in front of him. The girl pursed her lips and forced a smile.
I was just joking. Mommy said that such a wish is not something even the deities can grant.
As she spoke, she lowered her head and looked at her toes.
I just want Daddy to hug me again.
Before she could finish speaking, she suddenly realized that there was a shadow in front of her. She quickly raised her head and looked to the side. Standing there was a lone soldier, dressed in a red shirt and white pants. He didn't hold a rifle and was wearing a hearty smile on his face. He crouched down and spread open his arms like always.
Daddy.
The little girl pounced forward and threw herself into the warm embrace.
I miss you so much.
At that moment, the young magician pressed down his hat, straightened himself, and walked towards the entrance of the square. Amidst the night breeze, his long black robe swayed gently in the vast plaza. In a blink of an eye, it was Monday. In the ancient palace above the gray fog, the members of the Tarot Club appeared simultaneously and greeted Mr. Fool in unison. Klein looked around and suddenly felt emotional. The Hanged Man is currently a cardinal of the Church of Storms, and he's in charge of the Rorstead Archipelago Diocese. Although Justice has temporarily lost contact with the psychology alchemists, she has the right to become one of their counselors. The sun is an elder of the 6-member council in the City of Silver, and the moon is a sanguine earl. The star is a high-ranking deacon of the Church of Evernight's Nighthawks. The hermit is a hidden queen at sea, one of the 10 pillars of the Moses ascetic order. Apart from the magician and judgment, the other members of the Tarot Club are all demigods. They are the upper echelons of different factions in the mysterious world. And with the support of the Abraham family, the magician has a high chance of advancing to Sequence 4 Secret Sorcerer within the year. In other words, Judgment is the one who has the hardest time improving her strength. She is only one of the mid to upper echelons in MI9, so it's extremely difficult for her to become a demigod. Klein, who was shrouded in grayish-white fog, quickly retracted his gaze and laughed self-deprecatingly in his heart.
It's finally like a high-end secret organization. However, it always gave me the feeling that this is some conference between the various factions.
He then nodded at the Tarot Club members and said,
Let's begin.
Chapter 1277, A Qualitative Change. Upon hearing Mr. Fool's words, Alger's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly felt the feeling he had when praying to the Lord of Storms on Passu Island. When he greeted the Fool, he didn't notice any changes in him. Everything seemed to be the same as before, but at that moment he believed that Mr. Fool was different from before. This was something at the spiritual level, one that Algier wasn't able to describe accurately with words. He only felt that the body that was enveloped by the grayish-white fog contained a terror that was tens of thousands of times more terrifying than before. A simple sentence or simple action could suppress a person's natural order.
Mr. Fool has awoken further. After the world went to the forsaken land of the gods and brought out the City of Silver, Mr. Fool went one step further in his awakening. He already has the level of a Sequence 0? If it wasn't for the fact that the Sailor pathway is sensitive to the level of a high-ranking person, I wouldn't have even noticed it.
Alger wanted to say something, but he forgot what he was about to say. Leonard surveyed the area and saw the other members remain silent. He probed.
According to the information we have gathered, there was indeed a battle of gods. The participants that have been confirmed to appear high above Backlund include the Evernight Goddess, God of Combat, and Earth Mother. As for the outcome, I believe everyone knows it very well. What are your thoughts on this?
During the tarot gathering last week, Leonard had already mentioned the corresponding matter and had taken the initiative to ask Mr. Fool what had happened. Unfortunately, Mr. Fool only told him that he was recently paying attention to the Forsaken Land of the Gods and didn't give a direct answer.
I can't understand why such an outcome would occur. Earth Mother and the God of Combat should have collectively defeated the Evernight Goddess as a mother-son duo.
Catalia didn't conceal her puzzlement. Alger retracted his thoughts and said after some deliberation,
I received a report. Just as the war ended, Phaenopotter changed sides.
This means...
Audrey vaguely grasped something. At that moment, Derek mimicked the lady across him and raised his arm.
I roughly know why.
You? Emlyn uttered a voice of distrust. After all, the sun had previously been isolated in the Forsaken Land of the Gods, so his understanding of the outside world was all thanks to the other members of the Tarot Club. How could he know more about the details of the Battle of Gods than everyone present? Alger, who knew that the sun had always been honest, suppressed his curiosity and excitement from the bottom of his heart as he asked in a deep voice,
Why?
Derek looked around and calmly said,
You have to promise with Mr. Fool as a witness that you can't reveal what I'm about to tell you.
No problem.
Catalia took the lead. After everyone made a promise to the Fool, Derek nodded.
Earth Mother isn't the giant queen, Omabella. The real Omabella has long died. Her remains are in the City of Silver.
This news was like a bomb that landed in the hearts of all the members. It created a massive upheaval that threatened to destroy their minds. For a moment, Alger, Audrey, and company were unable to say a word. It was as though they had been struck by lightning. They were paralyzed in their positions like stone statues. After a while, Leonard asked in disbelief.
Are you sure?
As soon as he said that, he began regretting his question. Since the City of Silver had the remains of the giant queen, Omebella, it meant that the whole matter was highly credible. Subconsciously, Audrey, Forrest, and Theo cast their gazes at the figure at the end of the long, mottled table. They discovered that there was a smile in Mr. Fool's eyes as he maintained his sitting posture without any changes. This indirectly means that he is in agreement with the information that little son just provided. Before Audrey answered the son's question, she nodded indiscernibly and said,
This can explain many things, but if Earth Mother isn't the giant queen, then why would Angel of Fate Ouroboros believe that she is Omebella? Oh, why does the god of combat want to work with her? Who is she?
Upon hearing Miss Justice's series of questions, Alger suddenly felt a little emotional. The topic of discussion amongst the Tarot Club had finally raised from kings of angels to true deities. Previously, although they had stopped the descent of evil gods and had communicated knowledge of secret histories, they had rarely directly discussed the true deities. This was a subconscious fear, a deep mark left in them due to their upbringing in the present world. And now, the members of the Tarot Club had unknowingly lost the reverence that came from the depths of their souls. Catalea didn't notice this as she focused on Miss Justice's questions. She said thoughtfully,
Perhaps that Earth Mother has always been disguising herself as Omebella. This has managed to fool the Angel of Fate as well as the god of combat.
How is that possible?
Chio instinctively muttered. Forrest took a deep breath and said,
What a horror story.
At that moment, the world, who had been silent all this time, said,
Nothing is impossible. What if this cover-up had the assistance of the Evernight Goddess and other true deities?
A conspiracy that lasted for 2,000 to 3,000 years.
Alger's eyes froze as he instinctively shrank back. He had an instinctual fear of the Evernight Goddess and Earth Mother that stemmed from his soul. The Tarot Club members fell silent once again until Leonard repeated Miss Justice's final question.
Who exactly is Earth Mother?
As he spoke, he looked at the world, Klein Moretti, and attempted to get an answer from his former colleague. At this moment, they heard a long-awaited knock. It was Mr. Fool knocking on the table. Audrey and company perked up as they turned to the end of the long bronze table, waiting respectfully for Mr. Fool's answer. The Fool Klein chuckled and said,
I can give you some hints.
He looked around and continued.
Why does the Church of Earth Mother like to turn the sanguine into believers? The Earth and Moon are two neighboring pathways. Legend has it that during the Second Epoch, the ancient god Lilith, who represented the moon, died because of the giant king's betrayal. She occasionally responds to the sanguine's prayers as though she hasn't completely perished.
After the 4 prompts, all the Tarot Club members, including the moon Emlyn, thought of an answer. Earth Mother's true identity is sanguine ancestor Lilith. Emlyn's eyes widened as he instinctively sat up straight. His mind was a mess as all sorts of ideas ran through it. FNN, Leonard was first astonished before he muttered in thought.
A few days ago, the Church of Evernight stopped promoting the title of Lady of Crimson and changed the prayer sign from the crimson moon to that of stars.
As a high-ranking Nighthawk deacon, he was qualified to read the corresponding documents.
The Evernight Goddess used the authority of the moon domain as a bargaining chip?
Catalea said the conclusion that lingered in everyone's hearts. At this moment, they no longer had any doubts about the true identity of Earth Mother.
Thank you for your hints.
Audrey immediately bowed to Mr. Fool. After the others expressed their gratitude, they looked at the moon Emlyn, who was still looking stupefied.
Mother Goddess is the ancestor. The ancestor is Mother Goddess. So I've never changed my faith. It's no wonder I still continue going to the Harvest Church even without Father's corresponding psychological cues. That's because my intuition told me that the Mother Goddess is the ancestor. Therefore, the ancestor has favored me and made me the savior of the sanguine.
Thoughts flashed through Emlyn's mind as he found a reasonable explanation for the guilt he had previously felt. He began to believe that he was the most devoted sanguine. Glancing at the Earl, Forrest smiled with interest.
Mr. Moon, perhaps you might become the Archbishop of the Church of Earth Mother after some time. No, it should be the sole, sanguine representative of the Church of the Earth Mother.
This writer immediately came up with a nickname. Kia, Emlyn asked in puzzlement.
Why?
He believed that the ancestor would allow the sanguine to maintain their former state and not merge with the Church of Earth Mother directly. Oh, Leonard smiled and said,
Since the Evernight Goddess doesn't have the title of Lady of Crimson, Earth Mother will soon have a similar honorific name. It's impossible to fool the other churches.
Emlyn roughly understood what the upper echelons of the Church of Evernight were thinking. He nodded slightly and began imagining a series of scenes. His kinsman, who had previously mocked him for believing in Earth Mother, would queue up in front of him and accept his baptism. With this in mind, Emlyn's mood turned extremely happy as he couldn't help but raise his chin. After the exchange, the members of the Tarot Club fell silent for a moment, not knowing what to say. A few seconds later, Alger broke the silence and calmly said,
Most of our members are demigods, so the time it will take to advance will lengthen. Furthermore, we have our own factions. We might need a few years before having a single chance of obtaining Beyonder characteristics, potion formulas, and sealed artifacts. The focus of the gathering now might switch to exchanging information and engaging in secret cooperation.
Audrey, Catalia, Leonard and company nodded in agreement. At this moment, the fool Klein surveyed the area and chuckled.
With the matter regarding the forsaken land of the gods over, my condition has recovered quite a bit. You can exchange items of higher levels from me.
He pretended to be calm as he revealed the truth that he was recovering. This was an answer that every member of the Tarot Club had long guessed. Just as Audrey and company were guessing which level Mr. Fool had awakened to, Klein smiled and added,
Those items of higher levels include the sea god's identity, level, and strength.
Chapter 1278. Reminder: See God's identity, level, and strength. Hearing Mr. Fool's example, Alger's mind went blank for nearly 2 seconds. This was something that he had never dreamed of. From his point of view, by obtaining the authority of Sea God through Gehrman Sparrow and replacing Calvatua, Mr. Fool had obtained a stable and large number of believers. This was a crucial step for his recovery. Therefore, this secret existence definitely wouldn't give up on the corresponding identity. To his surprise, at that moment, he actually heard Mr. Fool inform everyone that the sea god's identity, level, and strength could be exchanged.
After further recovery, Mr. Fool no longer needs the identity of an entity at the level of Sea God, as well as the corresponding believers. This is the performance of a great existence. Something that isn't qualified is only used temporarily, never monopolized.
Alger first sighed inwardly before feeling excited. He felt that Mr. Fool's words were directed at him. In the Church of Storms, he had relied on external forces to become a Sequence 4 demigod. Although he barely managed to rise up to the brass, it was almost impossible for him to advance any further. As for the theft of the Book of Calamity, he couldn't see any hopes of doing so at the moment. Therefore, Alger could only temporarily suppress his ambition and patiently wait for the opportunity to arrive. Now the opportunity was here, and it came fast. Alger was currently a cardinal of the Church of the Lord of Storms in charge of the Rorstead archipelago. Once he secretly became sea god and controlled the authority of those waters, he would become the king of the Rorstead archipelago, a true king. With this in mind, Alger nearly couldn't contain himself. It took him a great deal of difficulty to calm himself down. Although Audrey, Derek, and company couldn't hide their shock that the Tarot Club was beginning to trade the identity, level, and strength of a deity, even if it was only a false god, they didn't have any intentions of switching to the storm pathway. Compared to Alger, they weren't that excited. They quickly controlled themselves and cast their gazes at Mr. Hanged Man. Alger took a deep breath and humbly said to the end of the long bronze table,
Honorable Mr. Fool, what price is needed to exchange for these items?
The fool Klein was waiting for the Hanged Man's question and said with a smile,
The missions I shall give you, as well as frequent praying and the sincere making of wishes.
What he wanted to emphasize were the words towards the end of the sentence, but he believed that the members of the Tarot Club wouldn't be able to tell. As for how he could complete the corresponding wishes, he currently had two methods. First, he used the other Beyonder powers he possessed to achieve the corresponding effects. For example, he could summon historical scenes and repeat the segment of gifting beer to fulfill the wish of the bar owner treating the patron. Second, he could directly grant a relatively low-level wish with his accumulated power of wishes and create a true miracle. For example, using a snap to cause the collapsed house to instantly return to its original state, succeeding in rebuilding it in the full spirit of the wish. In addition, Klein could use Saphira Castle's level and powers above the gray fog that was equivalent to a king of angels, who had yet to accommodate a uniqueness. In other words, when he responded to prayers, he could use the core powers of a sequence one, which was also the core power of the attendant of mysteries. After this period of experimentation, Klein had a rough idea of the two effects. The first was to create a nascent divine kingdom, and the second was grafting. The term grafting was coined by Klein himself. After all, he wasn't a real attendant of mysteries, nor did he obtain the corresponding mysticism knowledge. This ability could allow an object that couldn't be directly connected under normal circumstances to achieve an inconceivable effect by grafting. A simple example was to mix the concept of the beginning and the end of a path into one common node, making it impossible for anyone who walked that path to leave. To Beyonders, there were quite a number of powers that could do something like that, but an attendant of mysteries' grafting directly acted on a concept itself. Not only was it at a very high level, like the descent of a true deity, but its effects were bizarre and had a hint of concealment. In addition to the replication powers of the Grade 0 sealed artifact, the Staff of the Stars, Klein could completely respond to prayers like a king of angels while inside Saphira Castle. Furthermore, he could do more things. Fia. Upon hearing Mr. Fool mention missions, Alger suddenly recalled something. He hurriedly lowered his head and asked,
Honorable Mr. Fool, do you still need me to carry out further investigations regarding the 3 targets of the Fasak Empire that participated in the Konotop Sea battle?
He had previously obtained information regarding the 3 suspected owners of Creeping Hunger, but he hadn't found anything abnormal. The Fool Klein nodded slightly and said,
There's no need for that anymore.
He originally wanted to use this clue to grab the tail of the Twilight Hermit Order, but since Adam had likely become a god, it was better to avoid doing so. Respecting a Sequence 0 true deity was Klein's usual principle. He had to compromise and give up if necessary. Without waiting for Alger to speak again, the Fool Klein said in a relaxed tone,
Your current mission is to cooperate with the Sea God believers and settle down the people who have left the forsaken land of the gods.
Your wish is my will.
Alger replied without hesitation. This made Derek silently heave a sigh of relief. He no longer had any doubts, hesitations, or worries about the subsequent developments. He had full trust in Mr. Hangman's ability to handle matters. At this moment, the Fool Klein looked around and smiled.
Apart from the Sea God's identity, level, and strength, there are many things that can be exchanged for. For example, the Imperative Mage potion formula and Beyonder characteristic.
He didn't list down too many examples so as to prevent himself from damaging the Fool's standing. As for having said so much, it could be explained away that Mr. Fool was in a good mood from having taken another step towards recovery. Moon City had been passed down the heritage of an Imperative Mage, something Klein could exchange for when granting them the wish of being saved. Of course, even if he directly made the residents of Moon City sacrifice the corresponding items, the people who had finally found his blessings and protection would definitely be very willing to do so. They were more afraid that Mr. Fool would abandon Moon City and not accept their sacrifice. Apart from that, Klein himself had a Silver Knight marionette, the Seer Pathways Sequence 9-3 Beyonder characteristics, the Sealed Artifact, General of the Pupilless Eye, a drop of the Primordial Moon's blessed blood, and various kinds of charms and bullets that came from Worms of Spirit. If the Wishmaker wanted a consumable or something for a temporary loan, Klein could even take out more from the historical void.
The Imperative Mage's potion formula and Beyonder characteristic.
Gio inexplicably felt that Mr. Fool was looking at her. To be frank, she lacked the motivation to advance. On the one hand, she was only one of the mid to high-ranking members of MI9, so the chances of getting a ticket to the ranks of a demigod were very low. On the other hand, her father's reputation had been restored to a certain extent, so she had no pressing goals. Huaya Tho. At the same time, the war had ended. Her mother and brother had returned to Backland and were about to start a normal life. With Shio's current overall income, it was enough to support a wealthy family. All of these reasons made Gio feel that her current life was pretty good, and she didn't really want to change it. Of course, if she had the chance to advance to the demigod level, she wouldn't let it go. Due to the war, she had experienced the helplessness of a Sequence 5. Furthermore, in the Tarot Club, aside from her and Fours, everyone else was a demigod. There was no doubt that she didn't want to fall behind that much. Amidst her thoughts, Sio looked at Fours before bowing her head to the entity at the end of the long modeled table to indicate that she would work hard. Fours could roughly guess her friend's attitude because it was roughly the same for her. If it wasn't because she needed to advance to Sequence 4 to effectively resist the full moon ravings so as to stop troubling Mr. Fool, as well as the Abraham family having prepared the potion formula and Beyonder ingredients for her, she wasn't in a rush to become a secret sorcerer. As a traveler, she could go wherever she wanted. She could immediately head to a location to eat whatever delicacy she wanted. It completely satisfied Fours' initial expectations of being a Beyonder. Of course, she had another motivating factor to improve herself. After becoming a demigod, she could further help her teacher and family. Seeing the fog-covered Mr. Fool leaning back into his chair, Audrey didn't say another word. After some hesitation, she opened her mouth and said,
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a question. If there's a matter, and you're aware that its outcome has nothing to do with you at all, with it solely being the result of the feelings and gambling of certain existences, what will you do?
Just as she said that, Alger laughed.
Everyone is destined to die. It's inevitable no matter how hard you try to change that. Then, does that mean one's life is meaningless?
He seemed to have long since thought of this problem before adding,
Since you can't change the outcome of the matter at the moment, then try your best to improve yourself, obtain more power, and wield more authority until, one day, you can participate in the gambling. If you die during this process, it's better than not doing anything.
That's the most sincere words Mr. Hangman has ever said. It seems to come from his heart. The insignificant can also become great.
Audrey was touched and nodded indiscernibly. At this moment, the world German Sparrow looked around and spoke.
Everyone, I have something to remind you of.
When the Tarot Club members looked over at the same time, Klein controlled the world and said in a deep voice,
The apocalypse will arrive in about a decade. There's a possibility for everyone to be destroyed, including the deities.
Chapter 1279, Sense of Urgency, Apocalypse. Although Audrey had long learned about the prophecy of the apocalypse from the Church of Knowledge and Wisdom demigod, she never found it corporeal enough, feeling that it was meant to deceive the people. Even though she had already slightly experienced a war where the individual was puny, she didn't believe that the world was just about a decade away from the apocalypse. There were no signs of this at all. However, the person who had given the apocalyptic prophecy was Mr. Fool's Blessed, Mr. World, who had always been trustworthy and daring to strike at angels. Furthermore, his tone was firm, as though he had already seen what was about to happen a decade later. This made Audrey choose to instinctively believe him. Her heart sank as she felt nervous and flustered. Apart from that, she also felt her confusion fade significantly. There was still another decade before the end of the world. Even those who were drowning would struggle a little, much less a perfectly fine. Sequence 4 demigod. Apocalypse. As a cardinal of the Church of Storms, Alger had recently seen many apocalyptic prophecies, but those unverifiable matters couldn't compare to the world German Sparrow's abnormally serious warning. The impact brought by the two sources wasn't on the same level. At the same time, he acutely noticed a detail. The world said that even deities would be destroyed. Alger's first reaction was that German Sparrow was being disrespectful to Mr. Fool, as Mr. Fool was also a deity. However, he quickly rejected this idea. After all, the world Gehrman Sparrow was Mr. Fool's blessed and was the most devout believer. The other members of the Tarot Club might accidentally blaspheme Mr. Fool, but it was impossible for the world Gehrman Sparrow. Due to the two prerequisites that Gehrman Sparrow wouldn't be disrespectful to Mr. Fool and him saying that even deities would be destroyed, Al-Jar quickly came to another conclusion. In the world's Gehrman Sparrow's heart, Mr. Fool's level was higher than that of a true deity. Al-Jar never doubted the world Gehrman Sparrow's knowledge. After all, he was a powerhouse who often interacted with angels. This knowledge made him both shocked and puzzled, momentarily unable to find an even more reasonable explanation. Having used the blood of a snake of fate to advance to the level of a demigod, Catalia would also occasionally dream of the scene of the dawn of the apocalypse, thanks to her pathway having clairvoyant as its sequence 3. In addition, Queen Mystic Bernadette would occasionally remind her, so she didn't feel any surprise or shock regarding Mr. World's words. She just felt like the dust that had been stirred had finally landed on the ground. As for the future, this mysticologist was equally lost. Apart from improving herself, she didn't know where to direct her efforts. Apocalypse. Xiao and Fours looked at each other across Mam Hermit and sensed the raging upheavals in each other's hearts. They had never thought that the wonderful life they were living wouldn't last more than 2 decades unless something happened. This was a time where they were in their prime. Even if they weren't demigods, they didn't have to worry about the inclination towards losing control due to their aging bodies. As the person who spoke was the world Gehrman Sparrow, the two ladies didn't suspect the authenticity of the prophecy. They momentarily felt fearful and heavy. At the beginning, Derek couldn't help but feel depressed. This was because the City of Silver had just left the forsaken land of the gods and came to the world of light. Yet, none of this would last long before the apocalypse was ushered in. Soon he composed himself and chose to believe in Mr. Fool. Since this great existence was able to rescue the City of Silver from the forsaken land of the gods, he too could also stop the apocalypse.
Although I'm the savior of the sanguine during the apocalypse, I never expected it to happen so soon. I'm only an earl.
Emlyn couldn't help but frown. It was as though a student who had just attended a few days of lessons had to suddenly sit an exam. Of course, this also made him excited. After all, it wouldn't be long before he would fulfill his mission and display his greatness in front of his fellow kinsmen. Leonard had heard of the doomsday prophecy from Old Man Pelez Zoroast. Although he didn't know the reason behind such a development, he had long been mentally prepared. At this moment, he was the first to snap back to his senses and asked,
"Why would the apocalypse suddenly happen? There are no signs of it."
Klein controlled the world to reply,
"It's just that you didn't notice the signs. Do you think that a battle of gods erupted for no reason?"
Seeing that all the members of the Tarot Club were stunned and lost in thought, the world Gehrman Sparrow added,
"You aren't qualified to know the exact reason. Just understanding it would bring about an irrepressible corruption. Only angels and above can resist it."
This is similar to what the demigod from the Church of Knowledge's demigod said. It's close to the corruption from the cosmos.
I seem to have forgotten something. Mr. World seems to have figured out the whole story. Isn't he afraid of being corrupted? He's already an angel. He is now a he?
Thoughts flashed through Audrey's mind as she acutely sensed that the world Gehrman Sparrow might have completed his advancement and become a true mythical creature. In ancient times, this could even be called a subsidiary god, a member of the deity lineup. Right on the heels of that, Alger, Catalia, and the other members of the Tarot Club understood the truth. They knew that the world Gehrman Sparrow had already reached the top of the real world, becoming an angel that walked the land. Their guesses were related to Gehrman Sparrow's plan to deal with a mythical creature. Some believed that it was the benefits that Mr. Fool's recovery gave to his blessed. But no matter what, it was the first time the Tarot Club had a member at the level of an angel, aside from its host and convener. Of course, they weren't too surprised by the world Gehrman Sparrow's advancement to Sequence 2. They had long been numb to his progression rate. Klein controlled the world and made him look around.
You can think about what you plan to do next and how you would go about doing it.
Zio, Fors, and the other Tarot Club members nodded slightly as acknowledgement. Another 10 minutes of free exchange followed before this session of the tarot gathering gradually came to an end. After returning to the real world, Shio surveyed her bedroom. Her expression slowly turned solemn. She once again felt a pressing sense of urgency. After walking out of the room, Shio saw that Fors had also walked out to the corridor at the same time. She no longer suffered from momentary paralysis before coming out. Both of them asked in unison,
Where do you plan on going?
Where do you plan on going?
before falling silent. Nikera. A few seconds later, a handsome young man walked out of the guest room. He wore a pair of narrow-framed spectacles and had slightly fluffy hair. He held a few thick books in both hands. "Oh no, I forgot that I have classes this afternoon." The youth mumbled to himself as he rushed towards the staircase, completely ignoring the presence of the two ladies. He was Shio's younger brother, Rio Derecha. He had just entered a pre-law school. In Backland, one had to pass a pre-law examination before becoming a paralegal. Such a paralegal had to study and work for at least 5 years under a full lawyer before one was allowed to take part in the qualification examination and get a license to practice law. If one wanted to become a senior lawyer, one had to enter the Backland Lawyers School to receive university-level education. Gio watched her little brother run down the stairs, and a smile subconsciously appeared on her face. She immediately looked up and said to Fors,
I plan to return to MI9 and work hard.
I plan on making a trip to Teacher's Place.
Right on the heels of that, the traveler's figure quickly turned transparent and vanished. A few seconds later, Fors appeared at a relatively intact building in the rebuilding Pritz Harbor. Then, she took out a pen and paper from her pocket and wrote a note. She planned on telling her teacher that she had finished digesting the traveler potion. Putting away the fountain pen, she stuffed the paper into the mailbox at the door. This wasn't Dorian Gray Abraham's residence. It was the place where Fors and the gentleman had previously agreed to send letters to. The next day, when Fors arrived, she saw Dorian providing her with the meeting location and time. Emlyn opened his eyes in his room and changed into his coat with a standing collar, intending to visit Marquise Nibbs. When the carriage passed Rose Street, he subconsciously looked out the window and was somewhat surprised to discover that the door to the Harvest Church had opened. After a brief hesitation, he got the carriage driver to stop the carriage and he paid for the ride. After putting on his top hat and holding his cane, the red-eyed sanguine Earl walked up the steps and entered the Harvest Church. He saw Father Yutrovsky, who seemed to have grown a little taller, cleaning the prayer hall with his back hunched.
He has been released as expected. It really was protective custody.
Emlyn shook his head inwardly. At this moment, Father Yutrovsky raised his head and looked at him.
Wipe the candle stand.
I'm trying to please Mother Goddess.
He walked to the room behind him, changed into the brown priest robe of the Church of Earth Mother, and began working. Neither of them spoke a word. They did their own jobs and tried their best to restore the Harvest Church to its former cleanliness and tranquility. After an unknown period of time, a group of people suddenly entered the door. Emlyn subconsciously looked over and saw Baron Kosmiodora. He saw Viscount Ernst Boyar, who had once worked at the Harvest Church, and many familiar faces. Emlyn's lips subconsciously curled up. Chapter 1280, Chance Meeting in the Tiny City, on a steam locomotive heading for Mid-Seashire's Constant City. Klein, who was dressed as a wandering magician, looked at the young man and his parents across the narrow table with items placed on it.
I have 2 types of magic tricks. The first is to let your wishes come true. The second is to use a mirror to answer your question. Of course, the first type of magic requires payment, and the second requires you to answer questions posed by the mirror. What kind of performance do you want to watch?
The young man had black hair and brown eyes. He seemed to have received a good education. He looked at his parents sitting beside him and said with a smile,
My wish is too difficult, so I won't trouble you. In comparison, I'm more curious about the mirror that can answer questions.
Klein sighed as he shook his head. With a flip of his left hand, he revealed a silver mirror with a black gem on both sides. The young man opposite him commented with piqued interest before saying,
It seems to be an antique. My question is, what is the purpose of my visit to Constant City?
A commonly seen smile, one which was often seen on the faces of street magicians, appeared on Klein's face as he stroked the surface of the mirror with his right hand and said in a serious tone,
Mirror, mirror, please tell me the answer to the question.
After repeating it 3 times, he released his right hand and showed the surface of the mirror to the 3 passengers. There were a few silver words on it, to get married. The young man and his parents looked at each other in disbelief.
Amazing.
After boarding the train, they had never mentioned anything related to the wedding, nor did they reveal anything that people could use to make the connection. This was the first time they had seen a magic trick that didn't rely on props or a fake audience. Klein smiled as he covered the surface of the mirror with his right hand.
All right, it's time for the mirror to ask.
The young man replied, feeling intrigued.
All right.
Klein released his right hand in an exaggerated manner as though he was performing a formal magic trick.
Next, let's see what question the magic mirror will raise.
The silver words on the surface of the mirror had already changed, extending into a complete sentence. You would prefer your bride to be a woman in her 40s or above, right? The young man's expression froze for a moment before turning pale and then completely red. He immediately rebutted. He couldn't help but turn his head to look at his parents and grumble.
How is that possible? What kind of strange question is that?
Klein smiled apologetically as he hurriedly pressed his right hand onto the surface of the mirror, as though he didn't know that would happen.
It's just kidding.
Then he released his right hand. Mummai haba sabate. Mormai masas mera 100. Indeed, the words on the mirror changed again. How old are you? Marai layat mera 100. The young man replied carefully, afraid that he would fall into a trap.
25 years old.
He felt the gazes of his parents and the surrounding passengers on him change. Klein smiled as he put away the mirror.
All right, that's the end of the magic performance. You can try another magic trick.
Just as he finished speaking, the steam locomotive whistled. This was the sign that it was about to enter the station. Klein took out his golden pocket watch and checked the time.
Sorry, that's my call.
He carried his luggage and left the steam locomotive along with a group of passengers. He arrived at the station platform that had yet to be lit up with the gas lamps. This was Mid-Seashire's Beltane City, a city that had both prospered and declined due to the coal mines. To Klein, the greatest significance of this place was that it was a strategic node in the previous World War. Fasak had taken 3 routes in its invasion. One attacked the border along the Amantha mountain range to break through the land defenses. Another involved setting off from Sonia Island, attacking the coastal harbors, and attempting a landing. The third was to follow the main railway as they marched towards Backland for the invasion. Among them, due to the existence of the Church of Storms and the combined might of the ironclad warships and high-level arbiters, the naval forces of Fasak and Finapotter failed to obtain the results they expected. They even failed to obtain naval superiority, and on the battlefields on the Amantha mountain range, the headquarters of the Church of Evernight blocked one wave after another. It didn't fall throughout the war, thus preventing Winter County and Eastchester County from going through the fiery crucible of war. Of the 3 routes, the only successful one was the Mid-Seashire troops. They did a joint naval land operation and conquered Lowen's second biggest city, Constant City, the capital of Mid-Seashire. Then they made their way southeast, rendezvousing with the Intis troops in the greater area of Backland. Klein acted as a wandering magician. On the one hand, he had to accumulate wishes, display miracles, digest the potion, and increase his strength. On the other hand, he was planning on taking the path of the war, using his eyes, ears, and his soul to truly see the damage brought about by war. After knowing the secrets of the cosmos and the underground, he could understand the Evernight goddess's plan and accept it to a certain extent. However, this didn't mean that he was indifferent to the sacrifices. At the same time, he confirmed one thing. Even if he didn't stop George III from becoming the Black Emperor, the World War would have still erupted. However, Lowen would have had the upper hand. The Evernight goddess and her allies would face the god of combat head-on, forcing him to seek help from Earth Mother. When that happened, the number of battles between the gods, the intensity and scale, would far surpass what had transpired. Due to this reason, Klein followed Faysak's invasion path and wandered forward. After leaving the station that still had traces of gunpowder, he carried the worn suitcase with a set of clothes and made his way towards the area where hotels were located. At night, he would stroll along the streets and alleys of the city and perform wishing magic for everyone. After taking a few steps forward, Klein's spiritual perception stirred as he cast his gaze to the end of the street. There was a black-haired woman wearing a simple linen robe and a tree bark belt with no socks or shoes.
Ariana.
The leader of the Church of Evernight Ascetics, the grounded angel Ariana.
Why would she be here in Beltane? Shouldn't she have returned to the Evernight cloister at the Cathedral of Serenity? Or be sent to the Faysak capital, St. Milem, to preside over the handing over of the god of combat's estate? It isn't a simple matter if a grounded angel were to suddenly appear in such a small city.
Klein was puzzled as he frowned slightly. He hesitated for a moment before deciding to ask. This wasn't because he was a busybody. If anything happened while they were in the same city, no one could escape. However, at this moment, Ariana had already vanished from the crowd. As a servant of concealment, Klein couldn't track her down even if he wanted to. Similarly, when it came to the matter of concealment, Rhodes was helpless. Klein slowly took a deep breath and turned to enter the hotel in thought. He got a room and stowed his luggage away. Then he maintained his attire as a wandering magician and brought Rhodes along with him. Following his spiritual intuition as a seer, he walked all the way to the municipal square of Beltane City. Erected near the municipal hall was a notice board that had many notices pasted over it. Klein saw that several people surrounded it. There seemed to be a brand new notice, so he approached them and stood in the periphery of the crowd, looking at the wooden signboard. In the middle of the signboard, a slightly yellowed piece of paper covered over the other notices. On the surface were black ink and Lowenese writing. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am your new consul. Now, I will issue 3 new laws. First law, without my permission, no living being can leave this place. Second law, all life is equal in front of the law. Even ordinary people can kill angels. Third law, those who commit the crimes mentioned below will be punished severely. The highest penalty being the death sentence. 1. Murder. 2. Theft. 3. Chanting the complete honorific name of a deity. 4. Offering sacrifices to evil deities. 5. Fraud. 6. Leaking secrets. An announcement like this. Klein pricked up his brows when he saw this. Without using his spiritual intuition, he could sense that there was something wrong with the content. He instinctively tried to make his spirit body return to Sapphira Castle. But an invisible force blocked his departure, making it impossible for him to make contact with the grayish-white fog. Klein narrowed his eyes as he took a few steps back to distance himself from the crowd. From his point of view, an abnormality of this level had reached a near-deity level. He had previously been in situations of not being able to return to Sapphira Castle, but the reason was that he didn't have the time to take 4 steps counterclockwise, recite the incantations, or he had been obstructed and interfered by himself. There was only one instance when he failed to leave the real world due to external forces. It was a powerful seal personally created by the Evernight goddess in the foggy town. Apart from that instance, even blasphemer Aemon couldn't do such a thing. Of course, at that time, Aemon's main goal was to force Klein to stir Sapphira Castle before he seized the opportunity to use a loophole to replace him as the great ruler above the spirit world. Otherwise, this Angel of Time could have used his ability to steal Klein's thoughts to stop him from returning.
Who is this new consul of Beltane City? Is this the reason Ma'am Ariana came here?
As his thoughts raced, Klein made the magic mirror slip from his wide sleeve into his left hand. Klein asked softly,
What happened?
The aqueous light on the silver mirror's surface shook wildly as slightly pale silver words appeared.
A few rules here have been replaced. As for who did it, there's no way of knowing. Great Master, you can try finding the Servant of Concealment, Ariana, to learn the truth from her. Are you satisfied with my answer?
The rules have been replaced. Lawyer, arbiter, or a bug?
Klein thought as he looked around. He realized that the citizens in the square were puzzled, perplexed as to why the new notice would mention angels. Why did they have to request permission to leave? The war had already ended.